Hey, I'm Phoebe Roberts from Breaking Light Productions. I am a writer and a college professor at several universities in the Boston area, and recently I adapted a Jeeves and Wooster story to the audio drama form for a local live radio theater in my area. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that process. So in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there is a community theater called the Post Meridian Radio Players, or PMRP. And for like 20 years now, they have been putting on live audio drama shows where you can see the actors as they step up to the mics, and you can watch the Foley artists produce all the sound effects using practical things that they've assembled. And it's really fun. I have seen pretty much every show that they've put on since 2006, and their work is generally very, very good. And I've been lucky enough to get to work with them a few times over the years. And I have contributed, I think, 4 scripts at this point and directed some of them. And this time, the theme was to do an evening of Jeeves and Wooster stories, which I leapt at the chance to get to do one of these. Jeeves and Wooster has always been a huge inspiration to me in my comedy sensibilities, in my love for all things turn of the century, and they have always sort of influenced how I approach my own period piece work. Like my side comedy in the Mrs. Hawking series, Gentlemen Never Tell, is basically a Woodhouse-style comedy of manners. And the humor is very, very influenced by P.G. Wodehouse's particular idiom of the foibles of the wealthy and the cleverness and resourcefulness of the working class and that sort of thing. Well, the protagonist, Justin, originated in the Mrs. Hawking series proper. When we gave him his own story, that sense of humor seemed to be really well suited to what we wanted to do with him. And if you've ever seen Gentlemen Never Tell, the character of Theo Price, played here by Andrew Winson, is basically pulled straight from the Drones Club. He could be airlifted in and nobody would notice a thing. One of the fun things about adaptation is that you get to challenge yourself to sort of work in another writer's style and see if you can capture their voice and what makes their work appealing. And as I said, I love P.G. Wodehouse's prose and his sense of humor and all that. And the ability to make these characters sound like themselves, even though I was writing often new lines for them, or to make jokes that felt like they would fit in, even if the subject matter was different. It was a really satisfying challenge, and I feel like I did a pretty damn good job with it. If you're not familiar with the Jeeves and Wooster stories, they are a series of comedic short stories and short novels surrounding the daily adventures of this overprivileged and fairly stupid young man named Bertie Wooster, who actually has a heart of gold. And, even though he's not particularly capable on his own, he is kind enough to give you the shirt off his back, and he'll do basically anything for his friends. And he kind of skates by with the support of his valet Jeeves, who is just this brilliant mastermind who can always find some way to wrangle a victory out of his master's bumbling. And it doesn't matter how bad things get, Jeeves is certain to save everybody in the end. They've been an inspiration to, many artists over the century since they were first introduced, including Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry, who played the characters in an ITV adaptation in the 90s, which is pretty much considered to be the definitive dramatic representation of Jeeves and Wooster. So one of the things that's really fun about our evening of shows is that there's 3 adaptations of 3 different stories, and each one of them takes a slightly different approach. The first one, Aunt Agatha Speaks Her Mind, I co-adapted with my friend Jeremy Holstein. That one very much takes the actual vibe and spirit of the original story and speeds it up a little bit for drama and maybe sharpens the humor a bit for the modern sensibility. But I think it's a pretty solid representation of what Woodhouse was doing and captures his spirit. The second one, adapted from the novel Right Ho Jeeves, is done by Jamie Carlson, and it's a gender swap version where we have Betty Wooster and Regina Jeeves, and the friends surrounding them are flipped as well. And that's great for a theater like PMRP that always has more women than men trying out, but also puts an interesting new perspective on some of the tropes which, coming around in the 1920s, 30s, that kind of setting, often are very gendered. So it kind of takes a lot of the same sensibility, but moves it into a slightly different light. My piece, Jeeves Takes Charge, is an adaptation of the story of how Jeeves and Wooster first met. You may be surprised to hear that that's the last one of the evening, but I actually fought for that because it is the least traditional of all the interpretations that you may be expecting if you're coming in for an evening of Jeeves and Wooster. The original story, written in 1915, is very charming and funny, but it doesn't really have the structure that a dramatic piece of narrative should have. Many of the Wooster stories are highly interior. They rely on Bertie's impressions of things, his sense of wordplay to describe them, and that's kind of what drives the entertainment of them, more than how things particularly fall out. So I asked Jeremy for permission to start from scratch, tear the piece apart, and sew it back together from the beginning. So I read it a few times, so I had the sense of the story in my mind. And then I went in sort of retelling it to capture, the gist of what had happened, but with a little bit more mind to how I would structure it for drama. I think the most interesting thing that I added was I found myself really wanting to say a little bit more about the time and place that these take place in. One of the really interesting things about Jeeves and Wooster is, though they ran for, I believe, something like 50 years, Wodehouse was writing them, maybe even longer, they always take place in this sort of nebulous early mid-20th century. Nothing ever really changes, everything goes back to the status quo, and the world does not update or move forward. That in and of itself is a little bit of a commentary. When they first came out, World War I was on, and things were not great for pretty much anybody at the time. And it's clear Wodehouse was writing these stories to act as a sort of balm, a sort of escape, a little bit of humor and smiling to distract you from the difficulties of, possibly having loved ones at war or having all of the disruptions that living through wartime has. So the war barely even gets alluded to at any point in any of the Jeeves and Wooster stories across all of that time. And I can understand that, but I also think that it makes them a little bit more frivolous than possibly they could be, like they mean a little bit less because it doesn't have as much to say on that. In addition to that loftier goal of wanting to inject a little bit more meaning, I personally happen to have the sense of humor of a 200-year-old man, and I wanted to make World War I jokes. So I was going to find some way to fit that in a little bit better if I could. So I decided that the reason that Jeeves is such a capable man is that he did Black Ops during World War I. And in my version, he is just getting out of the service because the war has finally ended. And he is looking for his next adventure, his next thing to do with himself. And we like to, in a compelling drama that, sticks with you a little bit more than just a good laugh, we like to be able to send the characters on a journey. So I decided that if Jeeves is good at everything, that's a little bit, superhuman. So maybe for the last few years, he's had to spend so much time being the ideal soldier to win this bloody war that he's lost a little bit of, his basic humanity. And he needs something to help him get it back. And that something is going to be Bertram Wilberforce Wooster. Because by contrast, our dear Bertie is lovely and kind and generous and sweet, but also utterly useless. He has lived this privileged bubble of a life of wealth and ease, and he needs somebody to take care of him because God knows he cannot do it for himself. So I thought that what if the thing that draws these two people together and sticks them as a unit is that Bertie needs somebody capable to help him get by, and Jeeves needs somebody human to help him, get back to being a person again. And I really liked that as sort of, that's the trade for these two. That is the glue that cements this relationship together. So it makes for a really nice journey in addition to, watching the silliness of these two try to interact. But as they go through this little story together, they discover the value that each other brings to the relationship. And that is a nice little point of growth. Of course, let's not forget that these things are comedies, so I wanted to pack in the jokes as much as I possibly could. And as I said, I really wanted to get in some stuff about World War I in there that Woodhouse always conveniently left out. Maybe he was trying to imply that all the smart young men just died in the war, and that's why all of our protagonists were the way that they were. So I have lots of turns of phrase that reference it.
So, that's my charge, old boy. To pinch the manuscript before it hits the jolly old printers. I may not have served in the Great War, but I know a conscription notice when I see one.
I have Jeeves constantly referring to things that he did during his service.
As we used to say when we rooted out spies in Belgium, et voila.
And of course, you can never have too many cracks about the Kaiser. It's patriotic, don't you know?
In my day, when you wanted to pull a prank on someone, you liquored him up, sewed him to a canvas bag, and mailed him to the Kaiser.
Why do I find that so funny? Why am I obsessed with making cracks about the Kaiser? I also, as these things go, have a very good joke about Woodrow Wilson. If you like jokes about Woodrow Wilson, which apparently I do. So the plot of the original story, Jeeves Takes Charge, is about Bertie being instructed by his mean fiancée, Florence Cray, to steal this memoir manuscript that's about to be published that will reveal the misspent youths and all the embarrassing things that the Society Families of London did. And she wants him to destroy it so that those secrets never come out, and families like her own their reputations are protected. And Bertie has to sort of swim through his own incompetence and the weirdness of various family members to achieve this so Florence will not be angry with him. And Jeeves's assistance and interference is interwoven through this process based on whether Jeeves thinks it's a good idea or a bad idea. And through this, I also introduced a character that comes in later in the Jeeves and Wooster canon, Zenobia Hopwood, who is technically Florence's cousin, so there's a family relationship here. This helped because it gave Bertie somebody to talk to, like a friend who was somewhat on his level, as well as another female character. And it made it possible that when Bertie was blundering his way through stealing the manuscript, it kind of gave him a friend who could be somewhat in the line of fire when the accusations started going out. And having to decide how he's going to keep Zenobia from getting in trouble for his own actions is a really good way for Bertie to demonstrate his true character in front of Jeeves. So I thought it was a neat little way to bring in other parts of the larger narrative while still kind of keeping true to the spirit of the story. I also had a little fun with the character of Edwin Cray. That's Florence's little brother who, if you know Woodhouse, you know he loves to work in archetypes where there's a lot of characters of the same type, like the upper-class twit or the horrible aunt, or in this case, the awful little boy. And Edwin is supposed to be an awful little boy who, gets in the way and annoys everybody and isn't totally aware of how awful he is, but he is indeed awful. I decided it would be funnier if he weren't so much annoying as he were creepy. So I rewrote him to be kind of cringe-inducing. And I am pleased to say that in the rehearsal development process, with the help of the very talented actor Colin Zachariason, Edwin is now creepy beyond my wildest dreams. And in fact, I edited his part in the script to up the creep factor when I saw that Colin could handle it, so to speak. So he's one of my favorite little adaptation choices that we made that I think really, again, if your skin doesn't crawl too much, it's very, very funny. Yeah, so I'm really happy with how this one came out. I feel like it was genuinely funny. I feel like it captures the spirit of the original story while still making it move a little bit faster and having a slightly tighter narrative with a little bit more weight to it for modern audience sensibilities. Yeah, this is a really fun show, and I have to shout out all of my cast who are incredibly talented with this very challenging kind of language. Like, again, if you can't sell the wordplay, you can't sell a Woodhouse story. And my cast is absolutely nailing it because they are so quick and they have such good instincts and they're just really, really talented. And my co-writers and directors, Jeremy Holstein and Jamie Carlson, brought their stories to life in such a charming way. We make such a great package. Like, it is such a nice little progression of pieces across the evening with these 3 different takes on Jeeves and Wooster that are all funny and fun and clever in each their own individual flavor. So the first weekend of performances has passed, but if you want to see the second weekend, you can see it at the Mosesian Center for the Arts in Watertown on Friday, April 24th at 8 p.m. and Saturday, April 25th at 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. If you want to watch Gentlemen Never Tell, you can see that anytime on the Mrs. Hawking YouTube channel, at Mrs. Hawking. I will link to the ticket sales for Jeeves and Wooster below, as well as to my other YouTube channel. Thanks. Bye.